The Druid's been a bit of a polarizing class for most players, with words like underwhelming and not on par with the power level of the other classes being thrown around when people experience playing this class during the beta. Now, I think the Druid's probably going to shine in your mid-level, like 30, 40, 50 around there, and on its way to 100 is when the power level of the Druid's really going to start spiking. So what I'm going to share with you today is what I consider a good foundation, a good place to start with the Druid, highlighting some of the strengths of the class, and this is exactly how I'm going to roll the Druid when I start playing from level 1 when the full game launches. This Druid is rock steady. This build highlights two iconic things about the Druid for me. On the one side, the extreme survivability through skills that synergize very well with incoming damage and your ability to negate that, and on the other side, leveraging very powerful earth skills against enemies that are heavily CC'd, either stunned or slowed, and thereby allowing you to essentially control the battlefield and debuff your enemies further on, just pushing down that incoming damage. Now, taking us straight to the skill tree and starting us off with a very powerful basic skill is Earth Spike. Now, Earth Spike's good for two things. First of all, it stuns really well, especially against single targets, so this is going to be very clutch in situations where you are fighting a boss or a tough enemy and it's only the two of you on there. You can essentially lock down this enemy for huge portions of the fight, basically negating any of the damage that they could potentially be causing you. On the other side, you can also go deep into Earth Spike to Fierce Earth Spike, which is going to help you with additional survivability, because it's just going to keep chunking up that fortify gauge of yours and just give you that much more additional HP basically. Now, for your core skill, we're using Landslide, and Landslide is just ridiculously good because of the huge amounts of damage that it can deal, but also once again because it specializes in CCing the enemies that it hits by basically immobilizing them. Now, Primal Landslide is where it's at, because Primal Landslide turns this into a elite or boss killing skill. This essentially puts something called a Terror Mote on your character, and every time you use this against an elite or a boss enemy, it makes it automatically crit by consuming one of these Terror Motes, and you use, or rather you deal, a huge amount of damage to your target. In our third slot, we're taking arguably the best defensive skill in the game, at least on paper, and that is Earthen Bulwark. Now, not only does this give you unstoppable, but when you pick up Preserving Earthen Bulwark, it essentially allows you to take a snapshot of your base life and convert that into Fortify for your character, essentially doubling up on your HP that's available to your character. Now, the other reason why Earthen Bulwark is so good is because of the fact that it gives you unstoppable. It allows you two ways to potentially avoid CC. You can either preemptively avoid incoming CC by hitting it, giving you unstoppable, making the CC bounce off you, or you can use it defensively in a case where you have been CC'd, and then using this as a cantrip as a way for you to basically get out of that CC. So I think skills like this, which have multiple cases of use, multiple ways or multiple times that you can use them, are really going to be the shining skills of the game, basically the best skills of the game, and Earthen Bulwark is no slouch here. Next up, we have Hurricane, which essentially creates a wind-based AoE that hovers around your character. Again, once you go into Enhanced and Savage Hurricane, this is a fantastic way for you to CC your enemies by slowing any ones that are around you that are hit by this hurricane, and at the same time you are also dropping down their damage. Now, this is really good, because the bottom line is, you are, as a Druid, you're often going to get crowded by enemies. They're going to come right up next to you, and this is going to make those enemies deal less damage to you while you cycle your abilities on them and kill them. And then on to the secret sauce of the build, in my opinion, and that is Boulder. Now, I started experimenting with Boulder very late in the beta, but I was super surprised with the amount of damage that the skill could push out, as well as the utility. Essentially what it does is you create a boulder that rolls away from you, and if this catches any enemies after about a meter away from you, it carries those enemies away from you. So it's also a fantastic way to detach from enemies that are right up close to you. But the other thing is also that the boulder itself, essentially, if you have any fortify on you, so not if you are fortified, but any fortify, even if you have like 1% fortify on you, it gives the boulder 20% additional chance to crit, which means that this can actually push out quite a bit of additional damage. Then there are some passives that you should absolutely be picking up. The first one being Heart of the Wild and Abundance. Both of these essentially just give you way more spirit generation off of your skills, as well as maximum spirit. One of the things about the Druid is that all of the Druid skills are super spirit hungry, and so you want to give yourself the ability to generate spirit as fast as possible so you can keep pushing out those massive landslides. And also you want to give yourself just a little bit of spirit on top of the base amount, just to give you the 3 landslides in a row, which is really sick in terms of damage. Now, also we need to get Crushing Earth, which basically increases your damage against enemies that are CC'd, which this build does the entire time. As an example, if you activate Hurricane and enemies are right next to you, you are going to slow and debuff those enemies. That is going to count as CC'd because they are slowed, and that means when you then hit them with landslides, for instance, those are going to deal additional damage. We also have Stone Guard here, which says that when you have Fortify over 50% of your HP, which happens a lot, then you're also going to be dealing more damage. And you are going to be fortified basically the entire time you are in combat with this, because it's so easy to stack that up with Earth Spike. So this is just going to overall boost your damage profile. Last but not least, you'll notice that I'm not mentioning a 6th skill for us here, and that's because this is really dealer's choice. I leave this up to you to decide what you want to put in there. If you want to lean a little bit more towards pets, because these were buffed for the Druid, you can absolutely do that. The wolves are great. I personally think Vine Creeper is really good as well, because that's even more CC for you. Or you could just go for one of the ultimates, which have also been buffed with lower cooldowns for the full game version of the Druid, and that could also be a good choice. Now, the combat flow here, or the order in which you use your skills to kill the enemies, pretty much breaks down into whenever you see enemies coming onto the screen, you hit them with a bunch of landslides until they're dead, until you run out of spirit. Then by that time, the enemy will be right up close to you, so you hit Hurricane, which debuffs them. You hit them with a bunch of Earth Spikes, you give them some more landslides, and if they're dealing too much damage to you up close and personal, and you want to create a bit of a gap, you hit them with the Boulder. This, I'll give you, might not be the flashiest way of playing, and certainly some of the other characters kill with a little bit more pizzazz, but this is steady as a rock, and you will never take enough damage to kill you, and you will seriously push out some damage once you start locking down the battlefield. Last but not least, let's talk legendary aspects. More specifically, we're going to look at some gear, and we're also going to look at Codex of Power and some of the ones inside there that you should be keeping your eye out for. Now, bear in mind, I'm going to be doubling and tripling down on the defensive power of this build, just giving you extreme survivability. But the first one here is a perfect example of that, basically giving you a bonus amount to your next Earthen Bulwark for every enemy that you have CC'd up to 100%. This essentially doubles the efficiency of Earthen Bulwark and is phenomenal. Then we also have basic skills grant 25% damage reduction for a certain amount of time, which again, as you are using Earth Spike, you are just giving yourself a flat 25% damage reduction, which is phenomenal. Then we also have damaging an elite enemy grants you a barrier, essentially absorbing a certain amount of damage for 10 seconds. This effect cannot proc more than 30 seconds, but in cases where you are fighting a tough pack or a boss, this can proc multiple times during that fight, and again, just more survivability. And then also we have when hit while not healthy, in other words less than 80% of your HP, a magical bubble is summoned around you for a certain amount of time, and while you are standing in this bubble you are immune, and this cannot happen more than once every 90 seconds. So again, just huge defensive boost. Now, getting to the Codex of Power, one last defensive one here, basically saying the duration of Earthen Bulwark is increased by 6 seconds. In addition, killing enemies with Earth skills, which is pretty much the majority of our skills, it replenishes 21, this number can fluctuate, of your active Earthen Bulwark. So that means once you activate this skill, you are able to essentially buff it up again and top it off. And this is a phenomenal way to just keep the really strong defensive part of Elven Bulwark, or Earthen Bulwark, did I just say Elven? Of Earthen Bulwark working for you. Now, I think at this point in time you might be thinking, okay, this build sounds like it's defensive as hell, you seem like a fucking giant turtle, so what are you exactly going to do to deal more damage to the enemies? And to that I say, here you go. So the next 3 aspects are gonna basically use a lot of the defenses that we are building up, or a lot of the skills that we're using to heighten our damage profile. The first one is that your core skills deal up to a percentage increased damage based on the amount of Fortify. Now, we are building a huge amount of Fortify on this character, so again, this is gonna make those landslides really fucking slap. Then we also have ballistic aspect, which says that when you have fortify, again, not fortified, you just have to have 1% of fortify, and this will give your earth skills 2 ranks across the board, all your earth skills. Good shit. And then last but not least, we have crash stone aspect, which says earth skills deal a percentage more critical strike damage to crowd controlled enemies. Once again, this is pretty much all we're doing is crowd controlling the shit out of the battlefield. So this is going to help you capitalize on that additional critical strike damage. And remember, our boulders are critting more often, our landslides are critting more often. So this is just going to give you a huge amount of pop on those skills when they do crit. And that right there is the Rocksteady Druid. Let me know in the comments down below how you would improve this build or things that you would change. If you have any questions about the things that I've discussed in this build, let me know what you are planning to play when the game launches on the 1st of June, whether you pre-ordered on the 6th of June, if you didn't, which class you're looking to run, and if you are running Druid, how you will be setting up your Druid. I definitely think a lot of people are going to pick the Druid for their hardcore option just due to the fact that it is so extremely survivable and really good at negating damage. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what people can do with this class at the mid to late game level. But as always, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.